To install the front skeleton doors on your Polaris XPEDITION XP or ADV, follow these steps. Park the vehicle on a flat level surface, ensure the vehicle is in park, and remove the key. Next, release the two quarter-turn latches on the grille. Then pivot the grille forward and lift out to remove from the vehicle. Next, release the two rubber straps securing the hood. Then pivot the hood up and slide forward to remove from the vehicle. To remove the outer A-pillar trim panel, remove and retain the 3 screws from the inner panel. Then remove and retain the push-pin rivet from the rear of the panel. If the vehicle is equipped with a full or half door, the door must be fully open to remove or install the outer sail panel. Then pull the panel outward and pull toward the front of the vehicle to remove the panel. Repeat on the other side. Remove the front fender by retaining 4 push-pin rivets. Then remove and retain 2 screws. Next, pull the fender outward to disengage the upper tabs. Then, turn the fender and lift to disengage the lower tab and remove. To remove the front half door, find the bracket and the limit strap on the A-pillar. Then remove 2 screws and the limit strap bracket from the rear of the A-pillar. Next, close the door and engage the door with a striker. This will help support the door while the hinge screws are removed. Doors are large and may weigh up to 60 pounds or 27 kilograms. Use assistance when lifting and moving the doors if necessary. Then remove the 4 hinge screws. Next, pull the door handle to disengage the striker and lift the door away from the vehicle. Repeat on the other side. Set the door on a flat surface with the outside facing down. Protect painted/plastic surfaces with protective cloth or tape during removal or installation. To remove the half-door hinge, remove and retain 4 screws from the door and 2 door hinges. Then, remove and retain 2 screws and limit strap bracket from inside of the door. Repeat on the other side. To prepare the skeleton door, install the hinges and 4 screws. Tighten screws to specification. Then, install 2 screws, 2 nuts, and the limit strap bracket. Then tighten screws to specification. Repeat on the other side. To install the front doors, place the door in the opening and engage the striker with the door latch to help support the weight of the door. Then, loosely install the 4 door hinges. Do not torque at this time. To adjust the front doors, inspect the outer edges of the door and make sure the gaps are even on the rear side and the bottom of the door. When the door is properly positioned, torque hinge screws to specification. Then, after the door is properly positioned, check engagement with the striker and adjust the striker up and down as needed for proper latching. If the door does not seal or rattles when latched, adjust the striker inward. If the door is difficult to open, adjust the striker outward. Remove the striker cover to access the striker screws. Next, when finished adjusting the striker, torque striker screws to specification and replace the cover. Then thread the bracket through the limit strap and install with 2 screws to the A-pillar. Torque the bracket screws to specification. To reinstall the front fender, put the tab into the opening and turn the top of the trim toward the vehicle. Then push the fender inward to engage the upper tabs. Next, install 2 retained screws and torque to specification. Then, install 4 push-pin rivets. To reinstall the sail panel, put the front edge of the sail panel in place and push the panel inward and turn toward the rear. Next, install the inner panel and 3 screws. Tighten screws to specification. Then install a push-pin rivet. To reinstall the hood, put the tabs on the hood through the opening in the underhood liner. Then lower the hood into position and pull the rubber straps down over the hooks. To reinstall the grille, put the tabs on the grille through the openings in the front fascia and push the top of the grille into the correct position. Push each stud in and turn 1/4 turn clockwise to secure the grille. When hinges are removed from half doors, the hinge nut plate inside of the door will be loose and could fall out of place. If hinges are to be reattached to the half doors, it will be necessary to remove trim panels from the door. With the trim panels removed, the hinge nut plate can be located and replaced in the proper position. To remove the front door trim panel on multi-passenger vehicles, set the door on a flat surface with the outside facing up. Next, remove and retain the handle cover by prying up the cover. Then remove and retain the screw to separate the handle from the actuator. Next, lift the handle away from the actuator and pull backwards to remove the handle. Keep the handle for later installation. Then, remove and retain the 4 push-pin rivets from the front of the door. Next, remove and retain the 4 push-pin rivets from the rear of the door. Next, move the panel toward the rear and lift to remove the panel. Keep the panel for later installation. For more information, see your authorized Polaris dealer or visit Polaris.com.